in our next roundtable, through fermentation and other processes, the speakers are uncovering completely new ways to improve the taste, the texture, but also the nutritional value of plant-based products. So please give them a big round of applause to our next roundtable, which will be moderated by Shen Ming, Director of Strategy and Regional Expansion of Thought for Food. Welcome to the stage, please.
Okay. Hi, everyone.
You should go there.
Okay. Glad we sorted it out. Hi, everyone. Hope you're enjoying your time at the conference today. So today I'm really excited to be on this panel, moderating this panel on fermentation and it being a game changer for the world of tasty new protein. And we're going to, of course, dive into why fermentation is a game changer for this space. But we're also going to dive into the challenges of actually scaling this technology, right, and actually bringing it to market. So today, my name is Shen. I'm the Director of Strategy at Thought for Food, which is an organization which I'm sure you've heard about before in the conference. And today I am joined by a wonderful panel of individuals working on incredible things. So we have Isabella Iglesias-Musachio, who's the founder and CEO of Bosque Foods. We have Eugene, Wang, co-founder and CEO of Sophies BioNutrients. We have Sunil Mathani, who is the international business manager at Dacsa Group. So I want to, go around, have you guys introduce your companies, what you're working on, and also tell us why, fermentation is a game changer for this industry. So we can start with you, Isabella.
Okay, sure. Hi, I'm Isabella. I'm the founder and the CEO of Bosque Foods. We are a biomass fermentation company working with quite unique fermentation method, producing mycelium. We use that as the main ingredient in creating next generation meat and fish alternatives, focusing on center of the plate, whole cut chicken and pork to begin. We're going more of a B2B2C and then eventually B2B route. And we're an American-German company. Why do I think that fermentation is a game changer for the food industry? It is one of the most sustainable ways to produce food in a way where, at least with our process, we can upcycle waste streams from the agri-food industry and create high-value products rapidly. So I think fermentation enables us to be able to tap into much more sustainable methods of producing food, but in a way that is much less exploitive of the environment, much more climate friendly, but also rapidly, and able to actually produce products that are low cost, so we can eventually get to price parity, which I think, as everybody's heard, is incredibly important to be able to compete with the meat industry and so on. But little nutshell from my side, but go for it.
Right, so my name is Eugene Wang. Sophie is actually my daughter, if you want her. She's allergic to shellfish. That's how I started to work on microalgae fermentation. And then slowly but surely I realized this is a much grander project that can benefit the whole world. We started out in Singapore, moved to the Netherlands in 2021. I guess there's a lot of things I can talk about why, but the key thing I think about fermentation is that, just taking Singapore as an example, if you don't go fermentation, you can't really grow much of the foods that the nations need. It's a tiny city with about almost 6 million population. And then the government there has this 30 by 30 mandate to have 30% of the local food production by the year 2030. And that can only achieve, in my personal opinion, through fermentation. And that's how, just like Isabel was saying, that this is really the future for us. If you look at the whole Earth as a gigantic mothership, we have to go fermentation to be able to make a sustainable future. Thanks.
Well, first of all, I wanted to thank KM0 for the opportunity of being here today with amazing specialists in the fermentation sector, and second, for pulling this amazing event off. It's amazing the way, we've been here today and we've been inspired. It's been transforming. It's been really inspirational and overall a fantastic experience as every year, 5 now, and many more to go. So thanks for that. And well, Dacsa Group, Dacsa is a Spanish family-owned company owned by Araceli and Ricardo Ciscar. And we actually are known, or most of the people know us because of our milling business. We actually have 3 business units, just to give a bit of context of how suddenly millers turn out to be in the fermentation sector. So we're the European leading corn milling company, an important player in the rice milling sector too. And then we have a third division, third business unit, which is where 99% of the innovation in the company takes place, which is what we call food solutions. And in food solutions, actually, why did food solutions appear in Dacsa's lives? It's actually because, first of all, we have a CEO who's a visionary, and as you all know, 10 years back, there was quite a bit of pressure from the market on carbohydrates. Suddenly, carbohydrates were the worst thing ever, you know. So if you actually think about it, corn, rice, 100% carb-focused business. So it was time to diversify. And at that point in business, the choice Araceli made was to diversify at a technology level and at a ingredient level, adding new value to the market. And we did so by moving or shifting towards the protein sector. Started 10 years back with extrusion, in this case milling legumes, okay, so chickpeas, beans, and made them into flours, and they've catered and added value to many of the new products that now are hotcakes, selling like hotcakes on the shelves, which is like lentil pastas or many of the healthy snacks that we see on shelves today. But 10 years back, nobody was actually doing it, so we were one of the pioneers there. And that's where our love with protein pretty much started. But then we transitioned from there to understanding where the trends nowadays were heading. And we started 4 years back developing, through the knowledge we had, our own plant-based product through extrusion. We actually are very proud to have been the first production plant of high moist extrusion in Spain. And eventually after that, just 18 months now, since we've also developed our own bioprocess lab. We have two machines there, 2 bioreactors, and we're exploring obviously 2 things. On one side, the fermentation process through mycelium, mycoprotein, and then we also have a line of cultured meat, trying to become, you know, a relevant player in this whole food transition. So the reason why we're bullish about fermentation is, I think it's been pretty obvious, and it's been stated today that the food supply chain, the way we know it, the food industry is no longer sustainable. Full stop. So we need to leverage on technologies that actually change the way we go about this in a more sustainable, more efficient way, and fermentation is definitely one of the game-changing technologies that is going to disrupt the industry forward.
Yeah, great. So yeah, fermentation, you know, as we know, is a game changer. It's a very efficient, age-old technology and process, right? But it's only game changing if we can actually scale the technology, bring it to market, right? And so what I really, you know, want to dig into today is actually the challenges to actually bring that to market, right? And we're going to dive into different aspects of that today. And so the first aspect that I want to talk about, which we have talked about for the startups first, right, is making that transition from being an R&D focused company to being a commercially, you know, going to market focused company, and more, you know, about the productization piece involving maybe you need to change formulation, you need to change your process slightly, right, to actually bring it to a commercial scale. And what are, for the startups first, like what are important considerations and factors in this productization piece and actually making that conscious move from R&D, you know, to product? Would love to hear from the startups first, and then Sunil, on your perspective from a corporate point of view, support-wise.
Okay. I think in terms of taking the step from R&D to commercial products, having something that's market ready, I mean, for us, like a lot of it has to do with our own product formulation, making sure you're working with not only a formulation that is something that you can produce at lab scale, but that can be produced and actually manufactured in the CMOs that you're going to be working with, or if you have your own production line, then something that you've actually designed that is scalable. So for what we're doing, which is quite, I'd say unique, because we're not, a lot of what let me just like back up and explain, because we're working with mycelium and the way we grow it, we are actually trying to bypass the need for extrusion. And so that's one thing that for us is a very unique selling proposition. It's one of our advantages of our technology. It's that we actually don't need to use this type of processing technique, because we are essentially growing the texture throughout our fermentation process. So for us then, specifically for Bosque, what we look for are what are types of production lines that we can tap into that are already scaled, i.e. the plant-based meat industry or even meat production lines. And we then have, focused our product development to be able to produce these products on this manufacturing scale. So if, we're thinking about what are the things that we keep in mind, it really is understanding what are the production processes that are already scaled, what are the production lines that are out there with our CMOs, and designing from day one actually products that fit into that kind of plug-and-play production line and manufacturing system, instead of producing a product at a lab scale and then having to figure out how do you then get that to a commercially viable product. And we're lucky that we have an amazing team that has commercially produced products for the market, including the plant-based meat market, for decades. So they have kind of taken that into consideration from day one. But I think there is always, there's that actual production piece, and there's always the ingredients as well. For us, though, we try to work with very, kind of typical ingredients from companies that you will have met here as well, beyond our mycelium, because, working with one novel ingredient is enough, I would say. Yeah.
Well, for us, commercialization is actually exactly the reason why we have to move to Europe. In Asia, there's just not a whole ecosystem for bioprocess technology like we develop to scale up. There's lack of talent. I'm talking about experienced talent. There's lack of CDMOs. Regulatory-wise, it's even a nightmare. Asia is such a breaking apart market that you have to tackle each and every country regulatory-wise to get into every market. Here in Europe, we have the whole ecosystem, all the knowledge, experienced professionals. Regulatory-wise, we just have to conquer EFSA, one body, one government body, and then you can go into every market, especially for ingredients. And so that's why Europe, I always tell people, is going to be the epicenter of the new protein, because all the new protein is about fermentation. Look at the technology we're developing in the cell-based guys as well. But Europe is not without any issues going forward into the future. A lot of your infrastructure was designed around pharmaceutical and nutraceutical industry. When we talk to the CDMOs, one of the biggest problems is that we are food tech companies. We're building a commodity. We're building the food ingredients. I don't need a fancy bioreactor. I need a big bioreactor with very low cost operation. But a lot of CDMOs that we're talking to, especially the big CMOs, established ones, they tend to work with the pharmaceutical companies. They like the batch fermentation, not the continuum fermentation we need to have. Their batch is small because their margin is high. In our case, our batch has to be huge. Our margin needs to be low. And that is something infrastructure-wise Europe is lacking. Not just Europe, should I say. It's the whole world is facing the problem. And I know there are a lot of companies, a lot of organizations are working on that. But going forward, this is really, when it comes to the commercialization, this is really where we have to address. Talking about price parity, without continuous and big scale fermentation, price parity with the conventional either plant-based or animal-based protein is not going to happen. So that's just my 2 cents.
So what I would say is the challenges we see are plenty, of course, but to take R&D to the business from R&D to a commercial side, I think I would just maybe slightly change the approach and think about putting the customer in the epicenter of each decision we make in the company. You know, when that happens and we are understanding exactly what the market needs, what are the consumers' needs, why are they eating what they're eating, why aren't they eating the things that they're deciding not to buy, what are the triggers, what is going to actually make them move, shift, change towards consuming these new proteins that we're actually developing, what are the drawbacks and fears, what is their perception about these kind of products, until and unless we do not dive into the mind of our consumers and understand them completely and surround ourselves by not only the sales teams, I mean, this is a whole teamwork between sales department, marketing departments, because there's a lot of education still. How do we change a perception? Just by changing the product? No. We need to keep pushing the messages forward, the messages that actually are the backbone of what we're building. We need to push these messages to the market for our consumers to understand why this transition is necessary, why it is important for them to consume these kind of products, why it is now that they actually have to start taking responsibility for what we're leaving behind for our children on this planet, right? So I think R&D, marketing, business development all have to go hand in hand for this to happen. And when that happens, then the magic will obviously start taking place. And suddenly price parity will be easier because you are taking the consumer in mind. You know, considering what Eugene was just saying. I mean, why would I eat something that I know is healthier, that has excellent texture, but I'm not being able to pay for? You know, so we have to work on all this as a whole, not just R&D on one side, investigating, changing the products or being creative, which I think is the other thing we have to do, being very creative to be able to develop the best products, work on the textures. I think Mark said it earlier in his panel. This is about food. If the food is not tasty, there is going to be no repetition, you know, so it has to be tasty, it has to be sustainable, it has to be viable, it has to be scalable, it has to be something affordable. So I think it's a matter of doing a good teamwork together, you know, as a company, and keeping the customer always in the center of our decisions.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, it takes a 360 approach. We've talked about from R&D, understanding the process and how it fits into integrating with a CMO, which, you know, a lot of early companies need to use, right, to be able to get to a pilot or scale. Talked about infrastructure in different markets and getting to that price parity, and you've talked about the consumer being the center of a lot of it. And I want to get a little bit more personal and ask, you know, the panelists, what are some of the kind of lessons that you've learned in terms of actually trying to scale a process and build this kind of more resilient operational backbone for your company, right, when you're trying to scale a novel process? Because getting to that and meeting, you know, expectations from investors or other stakeholders is something that I think every company in that kind of valley of death will face, right? So we can get to start with the startups, Celia, and then go to you, Sunil.
Okay, so lessons learned in scaling up. There's, I mean, I think it's like endless lessons on a day-to-day basis, but it's very difficult, right?
Yeah.
Scaling something that is novel, we're almost, depending on the fermentation process, right? We're coming from the same general land, but very different ways of approaching fermentation. So our method is going to be different, and their method is going to be different as well. But for us, right, we're doing something that doesn't even have those CMOs, right? So I think what Eugene was talking about is that there's a lack of bioreactor capacity, which I'm sure all of us know about, which means that the options for scaling for certain types of companies working with a certain type of fermentation are extremely limited. Doesn't mean it's not out there, but it's limited, and so you have to be very aggressive to get into those types of facilities. If they don't exist, if you can't get in, you need to build it yourself. It's extremely high capex unless you can get bioreactors that can be more simplified and just be lower cost and do what they have to do, but nothing over-engineered, right? So that's one issue. For us, we're also dealing with a similar issue, but it's more so because our fermentation method is not the typical like liquid state fermentation. So for us, that means that we are kind of scratching the surface on even what's possible. We're doing a lot of discovery work. We see that there's a lot of advantages with that in terms of cost, the future ability for us to reach price parity quickly once we scale. But of course, being able to get there is a huge challenge. So in terms of going through that process from lab to a completed successful pilot, it is just a constant iteration and being able to learn every single time you do a run on what's going well, what's not. So just to be perfectly frank, I think the difficult part is it takes time. And meanwhile, you are also fundraising, you're trying to go through regulatory, you're trying to improve your products for the market. So I think, to be perfectly frank, what is most difficult about what we're doing today is not, I would say two things. It's not the fact that it's difficult to scale. I think we know that it can scale. We have that proof of concept. We just know that it will take time, and what has changed is the market, and what is not changed is the difficulty of the regulatory landscape.
Yeah.
So I think Eugene and I hold slightly different opinions on the matter, but I love Europe, obviously, I'm here, but I don't think, I hope that it is a great place for fermentation in the future. I really, really do, because that would be very convenient because I live here. But I find it very difficult for most startups that are in my space that are also working with something novel to just work around the fact that for EFSA it's costly. It takes forever, maybe not forever, but definitely a couple of years. And for startups, a couple of years could be life or death, right? Yeah. So frankly speaking, that forces, I think, a lot of innovation out that starts in Europe to move outside of it. Mm-hmm. And so in terms of scaling is always going to be hard. But I guess my answer to that is you have good scientists, you have good science, it takes the time that it will take because you can't rush science. Mm-hmm. But what is difficult is the funding environment, which we'll talk about maybe later. And I think what's more difficult is the pressure that regulatory puts on startups to potentially even have to leave Europe to commercialize. So it's I don't know if I answered your question exactly.
No, it's good. We can dive into the regulatory side and have a debate about that later. But yeah, I want to give Eugene, you have any?
Well, for me, it's communication. It's not even about technology. Okay. It's the communication internally with my scientists in the lab and the engineers on the factory floor. Because what happened in the lab always not going to happen in a factory setting. So they have to communicate perfectly, and that's hard. Communication to the investors, that's even more difficult. A lot of times they confuse us with other microbiology companies. They don't understand what we're working on. Communication to the government body. Communication to the corporates. Fermentation, are you like the soya sauce? So I'm using the broth? No, we're actually selling you the microbes. So the fermentation we're talking about is different from the soya sauce fermentation, but they don't understand. So a lot of times, the obstacles are happening with the communications. And that's why we are here at this event. We're trying to communicate with all the relevant parties. What are we working on? What are the challenges we're having? Help us. Do us a favor. Make it happen so that the whole world can be benefit from it. So that's why I said communication is the number one issue. Not really the technology, not really other things.
Yeah.
I just have 3 words to say. Actually, it's patience, collaboration, and I'd say creativity are the key right now for this transition. Patience, why? Because earlier the VCs were actually saying that we're talking about food. Nothing happens overnight. We needed the time for things to actually learn, to make mistakes. It's a lot of trial and error, involved to be able to actually reach to actually getting something that's really worth it into the market, because it's food at the end of the day. Yeah. We need something really good out there to be able to create that wow effect and people to want to buy it. So we need that patience, but on the other side, we have a high pressure market. Everything is happening so fast that if you just stay put 2 months, suddenly you see 3 other companies taking practically over the market. So you can't really wait. So how do you go about this? How do you speed things up? Collaboration. Yeah. It is not necessary for you to know absolutely everything. So there are plenty of specialists out there, plenty of companies. We, for example, learn a lot by investing in other startups. We have our own investment vehicle, and so does KM0. And that's a beautiful source to learn, to cooperate, to accelerate things, make things really happen, you know. And I think sometimes when we ourselves have had beautiful experiences where, for example, with our plant-based products, initially the first ones we decided to do everything ourselves, and suddenly we were just brought a whole panel of experts, and what took us 9 months then suddenly was done in 3. And then last but not least is creativity. I think there are plenty of different ways to go about this. We, for example, have been, out of our experience, but some of the things we've been doing is, yes, we understand that sometimes the raw materials are expensive. Okay, then let's work on hybrids. Okay, if you have cheaper raw materials, texturates per se, that are already, have already been scaled, let's combine them and bring the price down. Or, for instance, besides doing that, what we've also done is using our own byproducts of our corn and rice milling processes, and with a very very interesting and unique model. We were using these byproducts as part of the source, you know, so there is a circular economy, you know, and it actually is allowing us to develop new products. And what before was a byproduct that was being sold to the pet industry, now suddenly can be used for human nutrition. So there is an added value in a byproduct. So there are tons of different ways to go about this and add value to the market without having to suffer in the bargain.
Yeah,
we just have to get creative.
Yeah, I love that you've highlighted, you know, patience, understanding that it takes time, which we've heard from you, Isabel. And as an investor and, you know, corporate side, hearing that is like music to my ears. So investors out there understand, you know, you might need to think beyond a 10-year fund cycle, you know, because food takes time, right? Like you said. And then you talked about, you know, collaboration. We can all understand that that's super important. And then creativity. I think we've actually run out of time, unfortunately, but that's a great way to end a lot of what you guys talked about. So I want to thank all three of you for being here and sharing your insights, and, you know, to the audience, and KM0, the organizer for this panel. So thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.